Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, sometimes changing one little thing can make all the difference in the world, can't it? So I'll give you a story, my own experience, from last night as a matter of fact. As you may or may not know, I've been playing in a game of Star Trek Adventures, the one by Modiphius, the 2D20 version. And this is something that I was interested in because, believe it or not, I'm actually a Trekkie. I like, despite all the Star Wars paraphernalia around here, I'm a big-time Star Trek fan, have been ever since I was a little kid. So I was really interested in playing this game, and also I thought it would be really cool because Complex Games Apologist was running it. So I got a chance to play in a game with him and Aloy, and we have our Jim Cushman is actually playing this game as well, the FNG. And also Jason, Dark Age Roleplay game. So we've had a chance to play this game for a while. And it was a system that I constantly kind of banged my head against. Despite the fact that I really like Star Trek, despite the fact that the mechanic itself is seductively elegant in this particular game, I kept on finding the experience less than satisfying. I'll be honest, and this is not a video about 2D20 Star Trek, it's still never going to be my favorite game. There is a certain meta element that you really can't escape, as far as I can tell, when playing this. However, video's not about that, is it? One of the things that we were doing was, we were using Roll20. We were playing on Discord, which is great. The only complaint I have with Discord so far is the fact that you can't, or it's hard to stream it live to YouTube. Like I would have to use some other software to actually do that, and my computer is not quite so robust. So when I've played games or ran games like Hollow Earth Expedition, I've had somebody else record it and then just send me the file. Anyhow, this video isn't about that either. But we've also been using Roll20, and I've talked about Roll20 before. I'm just not a big fan, but I gave it a try because CGA was wanted to use that for visual displays, for showing like the amount of momentum and threat on the board. It doesn't matter if you know what those things mean. They're simply quantities that, momentum is good. Having momentum is pretty good because you can use it to buy extra dice. Having threat on the board is good in a sense that it's going to create an interesting story because the game master gets to spend that to have bad things happen, to introduce complications, but it's also a little scary. And part of how you give the game master threat is you buy extra dice by giving him threat. It's kind of almost like a pay me now or pay me later situation, where you can either maybe not succeed at a task right now, you might run into some complications, or you can buy some extra dice. Pretty sure you're going to succeed at it now, but you're giving him some more threat, which later on may come back to bite you in the butt. But that creates a very Star Trek feel where all of a sudden, somewhere around 2/3 of the episode, boom, the hammer drops. And just when you thought things were going to get wrapped up, next thing you know, it takes a turn. There's a reversal. So it works really well. But the other neat thing, or the other reason we were using the Roll20 was that somebody made some really good character sheets for them. You can sit there and it's really nifty looking, and you can sit there and push some buttons and it'll roll the dice for you and all that sort of stuff. But I experienced problems with that, and part of what it was like flipping back between the two different, Discord and Roll20 proved to be annoying. The dice roll was very, very slow. I felt like it really removed us from the learning curve because it did the rolling and calculating for us, so I felt like I just wasn't really experiencing the mechanics. I also just find anytime there's some kind of picture representation that we're looking at that too much, even if I had two different screens, which I don't. Just having my attention divided, things like that really kind of took me out of the game. In fact, before this particular session, I was really convinced that I was going to go there and tell the guys, hey, listen, I'm probably going to drop out because I'm really just not having fun in this particular game. But something interesting happened. And what happened was CGA decided we're not going to use Roll20 anymore. And so one of our concerns with not doing that is, well, how are you going to have a picture of how much momentum and threat are on the board? Because it gets really hard to figure out. So, if you can't tell by the graphic that I used for this video, the little thumbnail, CJ made this little tile, this frame around his head, and in Discord, and it had the momentum on one side and the threat on the other side. Momentum was actually had a little Star Trek insignia on it, and it actually had numbers, so you could tell. Is there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 momentum on the board that we can use. The threat, on the other hand, had no numbers. It just went from none to presumably a lot. And he was able to adjust that on the fly as we were talking. And so you could kind of see these little, like thermometers going up and down. And it was brilliant. we used to be able to see on the Roll20, you know, like you'd see the little symbols, and you have to sit there and count them up, which isn't that hard when you're counting to 6 or 8 or anything. But just having that different representation of a thermometer instantly gave you this gauge of, geez, how much threat and momentum is on the board. It gives you this feeling of like, gee, yeah, we really have a lot going for us, or wow, at any moment, you know, the other shoe could drop because look at all of that threat. And while we have different opinions, and we've talked about, like, you know, how meta does that feel, having that there where we don't have to actually talk about it, but the entire time you can kind of see it if you want to, was really, really cool. But it took us out of the whole Roll20 to look at this little picture, look at that picture, etc., and put us back, to me, in the theater of the mind. I felt so much more engaged with the game. Also, we didn't have our character sheets that did all the automatic rolling for us, so we got to actually roll big handfuls of D20s. I haven't had an opportunity to roll a D20 in a little while, so it was really neat to just be able to roll a whole bunch of them. Or when it was time to roll challenge dice, which are D6s, just roll a whole mitt of those. That was incredibly satisfying. Even when I dropped them on the floor, it was still really satisfying. It was just this little teeny change, and it made all the difference in the world. I felt like I could breathe, like I could exhale. And all of a sudden I started to enjoy the game a lot more. We still had to mess around with the system. We got to talk a lot more about, like, what are we doing here. I felt like I was more involved with that because I was actually having to think about it rather than just pushing a button on my character sheet. You know, I found I could role play a little bit more. It just seemed like this barrier was removed for me by getting rid of Roll20. And, you know, using those the little meters that CGA had made, being able to actually pick up the dice, being able to roll them, being able to figure out, well, how many successes do I have based on what I have here. I felt much more engaged with the entire, not only with the game in character, but with the system itself. And we, you know, to be honest, the game, we had a lot of out-of-character moments. There was a lot of moments where we just had a lot of out-of-character laughing and humor. A lot of that was my fault, but I just, you know, felt like I could breathe. And so we had a good time. And we're still discussing, like, what we like and don't like about 2D20 Star Trek, and we're still going to keep playing it. But that one little change, just when I was about to, like, throw in the towel and say, you know, I don't want to do this anymore, made all the difference. Have you ever had something like that happen? Tell me about it.